حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي، أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. As you know, towards the end of the month of Safar, we remember two great tragedies in Islam. One of them is the death of our beloved Prophet Muhammad, Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alih, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And the other is the martyrdom of our Prophet's grandson, Imam al-Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. Now, both for our Prophet and for Imam Hassan, there are multiple dates that are recorded in history as the date of their death, or in the case of Imam Hassan, the date of his martyrdom. For our Prophet, the two most commonly recognized dates are the 12th of Rabi'ul Awwal, which is the most common date recognized by Ahlus Sunnah as the date both of the Prophet's birth and the date of the Prophet's death, the 12th of Rabi'ul Awwal. They consider it both Yawm Mawlid al-Nabi and Yawm Wafat al-Nabi, and that was on a Monday. According to the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the most common opinion is that the death of the Prophet took place 2 weeks before that, on the 28th of Safar, the end of the month of Safar, which is 14 days before the commonly accepted date among Ahlul Sunnah. So the Prophet's death, according to the most common opinion among the school of Ahlul Bayt, it took place at the end of the month of Safar, and the birth of the Prophet was on a different day, either the 12th or the 17th of the month of Rabi'ul Awwal, according to the various opinions in that regard. So that is about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi. Then for Imam Hassan, there are also two narrations. One is that the death of Imam Hassan took place on the 7th of the month of Safar, and the other is that it took place at the end of the month of Safar, or also on the 28th of the month of Safar. And this opinion is the more common and the more authentic. So according to the most authentic narrations, the death of Prophet Muhammad and the death of Imam Hassan, may Allah's peace and blessings be with both of them, they took place on the same day, 50 years apart, I should say 40 years apart, but the same day of the year. And there is a similarity in the personality and the character and the attributes of our Prophet and his grandson and his successor and heir, Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. Salawatullah Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And one of those similarities is that there was a fitna that came after the death of our Prophet and a fitna that came after the death of Imam Hassan. And that fitna was to recognize who is the true heir and the true representative of the religion and the values and the authority of the Prophet. After the death of Rasulullah, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alih, there were some people who believed that it was up to the ummah to choose who they wanted to represent them and who they wanted to lead them. And then there were those people who understood and who remained firm to their pledge of allegiance and their covenant to follow their Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam and Ahlul Bayt of our Prophet. May Allah's peace and blessings be with them. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The same thing is true of the life of our second Imam. He was recognized as the leader of the Muslim Ummah after the death of Imam Ali by the mu'mineen and by the general population of the Muslims. Those who did not believe in the infallibility and in the imamat of Ahlul Bayt, they did believe that Imam Ali was the legitimate caliph and obedience to him was obligatory. And they believed that Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he was the legitimately chosen successor to the caliphate after Imam Ali. But a similar fitna took place after the death of Imam Hassan, that now who are people to follow? And some of the things which were not as clear before, they became clear after the death of Imam Hassan. So maybe 40 years earlier, after the death of the Prophet, somebody would say, what is the big deal? Whether somebody follows the path of Saqifa or somebody follows the path of Ahlul Bayt and the call of Imam Ali and Sayyidah Fatimah Zahra salamullahi alayha. Because the Prophet was just until a few days before present among the Muslims. And so there was no outward difference of opinion, no glaring issues where we could say that Saqifa has this understanding or this practice of Islam and Ahlul Bayt have this other practice or understanding of Islam. Those differences were not visible to people because until just yesterday, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi himself was still present. He was guiding, he was leading, and he was maintaining the unity of action and purpose among the Muslims. And so, because the Quran was there, because that strength of Islam represented in the unity of the community under the Prophet was there, and any kind of differences they were under the surface and they were managed by the Prophet, many of the Muslims did not realize that it was not just a minor detail, whether you follow one leader or another. There is an entire belief and value system that is contained within the person of Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. You don't just lose an individual or an imam, but you lose access to an understanding and a genuine connection to the teachings of the Prophet if you do not follow Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam as your leader. After Saqifa, that was not clear to many people. And so when Imam Ali and Sayyidah Fatima went door to door among the Ansar, they said, you know, we have pledged allegiance, and if you had come to us before, then we would have obeyed you, we would have followed you, but now we have already made a promise and a pledge and a commitment, and it is not a good idea to go back. And in reality, that second pledge they had made after Saqifa did not have any validity or any authority. Number one, because they had already pledged their obedience and their allegiance to Imam Ali on the day of Ghadir Khum. And that prior contract, that covenant, was still in effect and it was still binding upon them. And second of all, even if we ignore the covenant of Ghadir Khum, any agreement, any contract, any covenant made in contradiction to the command of Allah and the command of the Prophet does not have any validity. So the proper response of the Ansar should have been that now that you have come to us and we realize that we made a mistake, then we will follow you. Tell us what is your command so that we can repent of the mistake we made by not coming to the door of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam immediately after the death of the Prophet in order to find out what is our duty and our obligation to Allah and to our leader and to our religion. But they did not do that. And many of them did not do that because in their mind they were saying that we don't want to cause disunity or cause fitna in the Muslim community. Now, after the death of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, you have a similar kind of a question. But now, that which was not so clear to people earlier at the time of Saqifa had become much more clear. Don't think that those deviations and those problems, they showed up in the time of Muawiyah. That is a mistake that many people who look at Islamic history, they make. They think that everything was good and we had a Khilafa Rashida, an upright and an enlightened system of government and society, and then all of a sudden towards these later decades, in the end of the Caliphate of Uthman or during the Caliphate of Muawiyah, now we had problems that crept up. Or maybe they would say that that problem, it crept up after the death of Uthman and during the Caliphate of Imam Ali alayhi salam. But regardless of when people show the symptoms and see the effect, that is not the source of the disease. That is when you see that the patient is on his deathbed, when the patient is gravely ill. But the source of that sickness, it came much earlier, when the Ummah did not follow Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. And so if you want to understand the nature of the deviation after the death of the Prophet, And if you want to understand what is implicit within Saqifa, then one of the best ways to do that is to look at the death of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. And you can see that the crisis of legitimacy, of leadership and authority and guidance in Islam is not just about an individual who is to be the caliph or who is to be the imam, but it is about a principle and a value system, what is to be the nature of our understanding of leadership in Islam and the purpose of our religion and the practice of our religion in our individual lives and in our collective lives. And there is another similarity that we have from the life of our Prophet and the life of Imam Hassan. Not necessarily the death of Imam Hassan, but the life of Imam Hassan. Sometimes people have questions about Ghadir Khum. That what exactly did the Prophet want to accomplish in Ghadir Khum? Was it a political appointment of Imam Ali as the governing authority of the Muslims? Or was it a spiritual authority of Imam Ali as a religious guide, but not necessarily as a political authority over the Muslims? Or was it merely an affirmation of the love that the Prophet had for Imam Ali and not any kind of specific religious or political authority at all? The correct and the authentic view is that in Ghadir Khum, our Prophet gave Imam Ali alayhi salam that same divinely granted authority that he himself had over the Muslims in all of their affairs, individual and collective affairs, their religious and their personal and their political and all of their other areas of life. Just as the Prophet was awla bil mu'minina min anfusihim and had a greater right to the believers than they have to themselves, in Ghadir Khum, Imam Ali was granted that same authority and leadership over the Muslims. This is the authentic view of Islam and the teaching of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Then there is a view that is subscribed to by some who consider themselves to be Sufis. They say that, well, the political authority, it followed the consensus or the choice of the caliphs, but Ahlul Bayt have a special role, and that is a spiritual and a religious role. So in Ghadir Khum, the Prophet conferred that wilaya over religious affairs to Imam Ali. But in this view, that does not contradict the right of the companions to choose who will be the political leader of the Muslims, and so they accept that the logic of Saqifa and the choice of the caliph is also correct. And then there is a third view, which is the mainstream view among the Sunni community, which is that it was not any particular political authority or any specific religious wilaya or authority that was granted by the Prophet in Ghadir Khum. It was just a statement that the Prophet loves Imam Ali and people should not object to the decisions that Imam Ali makes when he is on a mission given to him by the Prophet. So there are these three different understandings of Ghadir Khum. That which is authentic, that the Prophet conferred his own prophetic authority as the leader and the guide of the Muslims in all spheres of their life to Imam Ali alayhi salam. It is not purely political, because religion should not be summarized within politics, but it is far greater than just political authority and leadership. It is the guidance and the centrality of Imam Ali for all of the affairs of the Muslims. This is the correct understanding of Ghadir Khum. Then there is a watered down version believed by some that it was just religious authority and not political authority. And then there is another even more watered down version, which is that it was neither political authority nor any special religious authority. It was just a statement of the love and the attachment of the Prophet to Imam Ali. Now, one of the reasons why there is this disagreement is because there was so much effort to erase Ghadir Khum and the significance and the meaning of what the Prophet said. And this is where the life of Imam Hassan can become so instructive. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That notice that Imam Ali did for his successor the very same thing that the Prophet did for his successor. And if you have any confusion because of the false reports that have been spread about Ghadir Khum, then the appointment of Imam Ali for his successor can help you clear away that confusion and that misunderstanding. What did Imam Ali do? He didn't give Imam Hassan a political succession as kings used to do when they have a crown prince or an heir apparent. Then a king gives that successor the control of the military, the control of the treasury, so that they can assert their authority through weapons and through money. But Imam Ali, he made it very clear through multiple wills that Imam Hassan was his heir and his trustee, his legatee, his successor. And then he said to the Muslims that now you have a choice, that either you can succeed in adopting the command of Allah and obeying your Imam, or you can reject. The choice is not a free choice where whatever you decide is right. The choice is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the Imam to assert his authority not on the basis of the sword, nor on the basis of the purse, but rather on the basis of the conscience of those who are going to follow him. Let me repeat that because it is one of those common objections that people have about Ghadir Khum. Those who don't believe that the Prophet was giving authority to Imam Ali, they say that why didn't the Prophet make it more clear? Why did he say, Man kuntum mawlahu fahada aliyun mawla? Mawla is not as clear and unambiguous a term as, for example, the word Amir, commander, or Khalifa, or some of these terms that people say would have been more clear and explicit. Why didn't the Prophet then immediately say to Imam Ali, now you issue the commands, and you take the charge of the treasury, and you take the charge of sending military expeditions? So they object and say that Ghadir Khum is not about the authority of Imam Ali, because if it were, then the Prophet would have done what kings do. And the misunderstanding is that the Prophet was not a king. Kings want to ensure that their chosen heir or their son becomes the successor. And prophets want to ensure that their message and their value system is followed by their ummah. So the job of the Prophet is to tell people who is the legitimate heir, and then to leave it to the people either to obey and benefit from their obedience, or to disobey and be harmed in this world and punished in the hereafter for their disobedience. And you see that very clearly in the imamat of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. Did Imam Ali give his authority to Imam Hassan through military means? No. Did Imam Ali give his authority to Imam Hassan through means of handing over the treasury and through financial means? No. Imam Ali told all of the people of Kufa and all of his followers, Shia and the general Muslim community, that Imam Hassan is my successor, my legitimate heir and the executor of my will. And so if you want to obey me and if you want to follow me, then you will voluntarily offer your allegiance and your pledge of obedience to him. And then after Imam Ali was martyred, then Imam Hassan came to the masjid and Abdullah ibn Abbas came to the masjid, and that will of Imam Ali was read, and people were asked that, do you wish to obey and follow the command of your Imam and the command of Allah or not? So see how that succession of Imam Hassan, it sheds light on the method and the purpose and the wisdom of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi. Nobody should object to Ghadir that it was ambiguous or that it was not an effective announcement of the succession. Because if the Prophet had done anything else, then it would have played into the misconception of the people of Saqifa, that the essence of Islam is control and government and maintaining authority over the army and over the treasury. Whereas the Prophet wanted to say that if there is authority over the treasury that belongs to the Imam, and if there is authority over the army that belongs to the Imam, then it is because of the moral, religious, and spiritual authority of the Imam. And that is where the focus was in Saqifa, and that is where the focus was when our first Imam appointed Imam Hassan as his heir and successor and the executor of his will. Now, during the imamat of Imam Hassan, were there older companions of the Prophet who were still alive? Yes. Were there people who were senior companions and members of Quraysh that were still alive? Yes. But the fact that unanimously Imam Hassan was accepted and given allegiance as the heir of Imam Ali in the presence of the elders among the companions of the Prophet and the elders of Quraysh, it is a convincing proof that the claim of the people of Saqifa was wrong, that the leadership of the Muslim Ummah was meant to circulate among the companions of the Prophet, or it was meant to circulate among the elders of Quraysh. Because that is not what Imam Ali alayhi salam had willed, and that is not what Imam Ali and his followers and Ahlul Bayt executed when they pledged their allegiance to Imam Hassan. So briefly, we can see that there is a very close connection between our Prophet and Imam Hassan. The imamat, the allegiance, and the succession of Imam Hassan, it sheds light on the pristine wisdom of our Prophet in the way that he appointed Imam Ali to be his successor. And it reminds us of the comprehensiveness of the authority of Ahlul Bayt. that it encompasses all areas of our life as a believer, individually and as a community and a collective. I want to conclude with just a reminder of one of the teachings of our Prophet in his last days, in this very final part of the Prophet's life, in the end of the month of Safar. It is said that the Prophet went with one of his mawali, Abu Muwayhiba, to Jannatul Baqi'. And he prayed for those who were buried in Baqi', and then he told his companion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me a choice. Two choices. Either I can be the king of the treasures of the earth and then have paradise, or I can go to meet my Lord and then have paradise. And that companion said that, Ya Rasulullah, if you have paradise in both cases, if you become the king of all of the treasures of the earth, Allah is not going to take away paradise from you. Then accept the treasures of the earth. And maybe that was because Abu Muwayhiba, he wanted to have some more time in the presence of the Prophet. The Prophet said that no, it isn't because of paradise, but it is because of my love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I will choose what I choose. And so if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I can have all of the wealth of heavens and earth, or I can meet my Lord, then my choice is liqa'u rabbi thumma al-jannah. I will go and I will meet my Lord, and then I will go to paradise. It's not because that raises his rank, but because the presence and the meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so beloved for our Prophet that it overshadows even possession of every treasure and every wealth in this world. That was the choice of our Prophet, that it is a reminder for each and every one of us that when we have a choice between the treasures of this world or the pleasures of this world and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should always choose the pleasure of Allah first. And when we have to count our blessings, if we truly value the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as we should, then we will never feel that we are poor, and we will never feel envious of those who may have more, and we will never feel arrogant, because it is that gift of the teachings and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is our most valuable possession and the most honorable blessing that we have been given by Allah. That is a lesson that we learn from the choice of our Prophet, which was the reason why his death came at that time. It wasn't a sudden death, but it was a choice given to our Prophet himself after he had completed his mission. And our Prophet said that, "O Allah, if you are inviting me to reunite with you, then I will turn my back on this world and all the temptations that it possesses, because meeting and being with you is more valuable to me than anything else." May Allah send His infinite mercy and grace and salutations upon our Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam, and count us among their true and their loyal followers. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى علي أمير المؤمنين وعلى فاطمة الزهراء وعلى الحسن والحسين وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين صلوات. I seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for myself and for all mu'mineen and mu'minat. And I praise Allah for His infinite bounties and blessings that are uncountable and beyond our understanding. In the first khutbah, we mentioned some of the aspects of the similarity of our Prophet and Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and how the life and the imamat of Imam Hassan, it sheds light on the wisdom of our Prophet and the way that he appointed Imam Ali to be our Imam. A reminder of the comprehensiveness of the authority of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, that it covers every area of our life. That is also a reminder of the comprehensiveness of our connection to our Prophet. He was not just a messenger who conveyed the Quran to us, but he was a teacher, he was a guide, he was a role model, he was a father, he was all of those things that we need in order to be able to function and to succeed as a human being in our journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the greatest tragedy that befell Ahlul Bayt, and the greatest tragedy that befell the believers, and in fact all of humanity, was the loss of our Prophet, Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And this was a custom among Ahlul Bayt, that whenever somebody lost a loved one, maybe a parent or a grandparent, a spouse, maybe in very tragic circumstances, a child, or any other loss, sometimes there are some losses that are sudden and unexpected, and they are very difficult for a person to bear. But one of the things that helps us deal with our suffering and our hardships in life is to keep them in proportion. And so it was the practice of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam that whenever there was a tragedy or whenever there was a loss, they would say first and foremost that we mourn the loss of our Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And through the remembrance of that loss, then anything else that we might lose, that becomes easier for us to bear. Even at the very tragic loss of Fatimah al-Zahra salamullahi alayha. Now who was Fatimah al-Zahra for Imam Ali? For her young children, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, Zainab and Kulthum. In those most tragic circumstances and that difficult time for Ahlul Bayt, Imam Ali says, addressing the Prophet, that, O Messenger of Allah, if it were not for your loss, I would not be able to bear the loss of your daughter, Fatimah al-Zahra. Meaning, even that terrible tragedy, it gave consolation to Imam Ali to remember that every hardship and every loss is less than the tragedy and the loss of our Prophet. So this is actually a hadith of Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, that whenever you have a musibah, whenever you have a tragedy in your own life, then first remember the tragedy of the loss and the death of the Prophet. And then think about your own tragedy. It will give you perspective. It will give you consolation. It will give you strength. It will give you a reminder of how it is that you are to express your grief or your sadness and what you are to do with your life in light of that loss. So in the end of the month of Safar, we commemorate and we remember the death of our Prophet, that greatest tragedy that befell humanity, and that greatest tragedy that was mourned by Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam, even in the moments of their own grief and sadness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate the rank of our Prophet Muhammad, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate the rank of Ahlul Bayt, and may He allow us to honor them and to follow them to the extent of our ability. And where our own actions and our own intentions fall short, then through His mercy and His grace, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala complete our steps and correct our mistakes so that we are worthy of our loyalty and our following of Ahlul Bayt. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to have strength and consolation in the face of any tragedies that we may face in our life because of our connection and our love and our obedience to Muhammad wa ali Muhammad alayhimus salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. صلاة الجمعة.